All right, I'm not used to talking in front of this many people without a guitar, so it's a little weird right now. But I thought I would talk to you guys about how to demotivate your students, and I was kind of an unruly child, and the best way to demotivate me when I was in high school was something along these lines. The poster I found out was from 1974, by the way, so that kind of didn't really resonate with me. I do love cats. I'm more of a cat person than a dog person. But that didn't really inspire me in the classroom. But you know, we teach the new irony generation, and so I think students today might be more inspired by something like this from the Despair Incorporated company. I got it from a demotivational calendar that a student got me. For those of you that can't read it, the French fries there, it says potential, because not everyone gets to be an astronaut when they grow up. The students, I think today's students really love that. The reason why I'm here today, though, is to talk to you about the connection between mistakes and motivation, and to prove my experience and why I'm qualified to speak about mistakes. I thought I would show you a picture of myself from high school when I was a freshman and a junior. Now, I see some young faces in the audience, so I'd just like to say for those of you that were born in the 90s or later, that don't understand the 90s, you know, it's just a time, it was different back then. Some of you were around in the 90s and still might not recognize some of those fashion choices that I was making. But I hope this proves my credentials as an expert of mistakes. You're correct, that is a necktie and sweatband combination. I thought that was a good idea. I wondered why the first 7 people I asked to prom said no. Again, so, an expert in mistakes, I hope. But what I've learned, though, is how to leverage those mistakes into motivation. When I first moved to Long Beach, I taught at Millikan High School. Anybody from Millikan or went to Millikan? Right on, go Rams. And I don't know, maybe it was because I was such a bad teacher at that time, but my students weren't really doing their homework so well. In fact, only about 48% of homework got completed. And so I needed to kind of, you know, improve that. So I decided that I would make a deal with my students. If any class could get above 70% homework completion, not only would I let them choose my next hairstyle, but I would bring in the clippers and let them cut it themselves. Now, to those of you that are kind of early in your careers, just for the record, I don't recommend giving adolescents access to scissors, buzz clippers, and an available amount of hair to cut. Just for the record, in case anybody was as foolish as I was. Might not have been my greatest idea. And even though my fiance was not thrilled, that's right, I was engaged at the time I made that decision. Even though my fiance was not thrilled with that decision, the homework rates improved. The students were definitely motivated to do their homework. The class average across my 6 classes went up from 48% homework to 70%, and 3 of the classes were over 75%. So for me, that was a great success. Although you may feel differently. My fiance said I needed to find new ways to motivate my students. So I did. These are some of my teacher pictures. By the way, they tell you when you go to take the pictures, oh, you can't do that. I said, I'm a teacher, I can do what I want. Like girl mustache on my face. All right. Let me get back, though, to the intersection between motivation and mistakes. It all started with a concierge bell that a student gave me at Millikan High School. I don't know if you can see that. So the student gave me the bell, and I thought, great, you know, anytime somebody gets an idea in class, boom. That was a pretty dumb idea, though. It didn't work, and not only that, but it turns out, if you have ever taught certain demographics of students, boys between the ages of 11 and 16, they cannot walk by a concierge bell like this without just hammering it. So I had to take the bell off my desk and put it away until I could find out a way to, you know, maximize its value. But that was a pretty dumb idea. So I came up with this other idea called the Mistakes Hall of Fame. It turns out that one was kind of a clunker too. But you see, I'm a math teacher, and the idea is that when you're learning math, it's really important to make mistakes. You know, everybody's going to make mistakes in math. It's really important in the learning process. And this is one of the reasons why so many students, I think, have a terrible experience in their math class, is that whenever they volunteer an answer, you know, maybe they get it wrong. You know, the first time they get it wrong in front of the class, maybe the teacher makes them feel bad, maybe their students kind of make them feel bad, or maybe it's just their self-perception, they feel bad on their own. But this affects their likelihood of participating in the future, which causes them to disengage, which causes them to fall further behind, creating this negative feedback loop of math frustration and hatred. I'm seeing some of you nod right now. So like any teacher, I know that mistakes not only happen when learning, but they have to happen when learning. Think about every expert snowboarder. Whoops. Everybody's fallen. I've done that a couple times, showing off for my fiance. Every chef has had a disastrous dish that they prepared. Every basketball player has had their shot blocked. It is important, it is impossible to learn without messing up. And when a student holds back out of fear of making mistakes, they're less likely to try something new, they're less likely to create or innovate. And if you're not making mistakes, I tell my students, if you're not making mistakes, then you're learning wrong. You have to make mistakes. How many good things have been invented in our society by people who stepped outside of their comfort zone and tried something new to innovate or create? Psychologist Jason Moser completed some fascinating research about the neural mechanisms in brains that operate when people make mistakes. This is a picture of synapses, or a representation of synapses in our brains firing, making connections. This is what happens when neurologists study brains. They're looking for these synapses firing. So Moser and his team found two things: that more brain activity is found in subjects when they're making mistakes than in subjects when they answered the questions that the researchers were asking them correctly. More synapses were firing. Not only that, the synapses fired whether the students, or whether the subjects of the research realized they made a mistake or not. It has to do with cognitively demanding material, and when you're struggling with something, there's more brain activity going on than when you're doing something easy, which is why it's important for teachers to give cognitively demanding content to their students. The second thing that Moser's research team found was that their brain activity was greatest when the subjects had a growth mindset. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Carol Dweck and her book Mindset, but if you haven't, I strongly recommend just Googling growth mindset. Also, for my math teachers in the room, there is a book by another Stanford professor named Joe Bowler called Mathematical Mindsets that's also equally awesome. So back to this awesome idea I had called the Mistakes Hall of Fame. So what I was trying to do was point out these common mistakes in math. You know, there's a couple classic mistakes, and I was trying to destigmatize the process of making mistakes for students. But it turns out, I don't know how familiar you are with teenagers, but because I know we have some elementary teachers in here, but it turns out that teenagers are not exactly dying to be immortalized in the Mistakes Hall of Fame. So that was a clunker. And then I co-taught with my best teacher friend who had this idea that she called my favorite mistakes. And it worked for her, but when I tried it, it didn't really work for me. She's, you know, very maternal and kind and motherly, and so it worked. But when I tried it, I think students just thought I was being sarcastic or something, so it didn't work. So this brings me back to the concierge bell. I had this bell that students were very motivated to ring. And then I had this problem, which is that I wanted students to feel more comfortable making mistakes. Peanut butter, meat jelly. So I put the bell out on the desk and I said, you can ring it. I told my students, you can ring this bell if you make a mistake. And I figured it would be more likely to catch on and become a thing in my room if I gave it a fancy name, so I called it the Bell of Enlightenment. My student teacher came up with that, which I really liked. So we had the Bell of Enlightenment, and when I put it out, it had the effect that I anticipated students really wanted to come up and ring the bell. And now there's this Venn diagram in my brain. And I'm a math teacher, so I have lots of Venn diagrams in my brain. But there's this one Venn diagram in my brain with a circle for students that really like to get out of their seat at any opportunity. And that circle overlaps almost concentrically with the circle for students who need to feel more comfortable making mistakes. So it really was a perfect fit. Students were eager to come up and ring the bell. In fact, they were a little too eager, so I had a new rule. I said, you cannot ring the bell unless you can explain what you've learned from the mistake. And so my student teacher made a sign for it. I don't know if you can see this, but it says you are allowed to ring the bell of enlightenment when you make a mistake and learn from it. So this last addendum weeded out the students who really didn't have a mistake, and I occasionally asked them, what was the mistake that you've made, when they come up and ring it. And that did a good job of kind of getting just the right amount of students coming up and ringing it, and me holding them accountable, because I really kind of grilled them and asked them, oh, tell us more, tell us more. And so it really seemed to work. And I don't know if I started this or the students started this, but at some point, people started clapping in the classroom after they made a mistake. My school is very supportive of the students. So after all this trial and error, the system worked better than I could have imagined. After a couple weeks of using this final version of the Bell of Enlightenment, my students were really, they developed this beautiful culture of mistake making. And this growth mindset gave students the freedom to make mistakes without worrying how they'd be judged, which motivated them to use new methods to solve problems, to ask these really weird but thought-provoking questions. And we do these 2-month problems, one problem that lasts for 2 months. And so this Bell of Enlightenment really kind of encouraged them, I think, to start asking, or to posing these, to brainstorm these really tangential, but still related and interesting extensions to these big 2-month problems that we were working on. So the Bell of Enlightenment led to more brain activity, more synapses firing, and the heights my students reached once they felt safe making mistakes was really beautiful to watch. Now, I have a lot of visitors in my class because, whether they're friends from my student teachers or this math curriculum that I teach is very different, so I have a lot of people come by and watch that. Also, I do this style of group work called complex instruction, if anybody's heard of that. That's one of the things that I like to blog about. And if you're interested in complex instruction, really awesome. It's applicable to all students in all grades and all subjects. Sorry, all teachers at all grades and all subjects. And so I have a lot of visitors come by to watch these various things that I do in my classroom, and I started to get some really bewildered looks last year from these visitors who would watch students come up, they hear this bell, have the student announce that they made a mistake, and then people would start clapping. Let me recontextualize that for you. I had teenagers willingly admit to their peers that they made a mistake, to their peers, teenagers, and their peers would then clap for them. So this was really, really awesome. I was really proud of how this went. I want you to think back to your time in high school. Think about the class that you were the most demotivated to learn. It doesn't have to be math, it can be anything. Instead of dreading class, imagine, instead of being afraid of the teacher calling on you, imagine yourself being cheered for making mistakes. Now, I've made enough mistakes to know that the Bell of Enlightenment doesn't work for all students, and it might not work in your class. But the best way to show students the importance of making mistakes is to model this mindset as a teacher. Take risks with your students, try things out with them. I experiment in my classroom all the time, and when you experiment, you're going to fail, you're going to mess up, and I do that a lot. But luckily, my students are very supportive of that, and they feel that when I experiment, it makes them feel comfortable to experiment themselves. So to conclude, I'd like to tell you about my favorite gift, not the Bell of Enlightenment, that a student has given me. It was given me this past year by a group of students I've taught for the past 3 years. You see, every day I wear a tie to school, and so as a gift, these students that I've taught for the last 3 years gave me this tie, and it's autographed by them, but more importantly, on the front, it says, "Make mistakes." And when they got this tie for me, I've never felt more proud to be a teacher, because to me it says, we get it, we get it. So to conclude, let me leave you with another final demotivational poster from Despair Incorporated. It could be that the purpose of my time here was to only serve as a warning to you about what not to do, but I hope that my mistakes and successes with the Bell of Enlightenment will help you and your students feel more comfortable making mistakes and to grow from those mistakes. If you're interested to know more, there's my EduBlog. I appreciate your time. Thank you.